Let me start by thanking the Korean National Commission for UNESCO and the Korean Studies Institute for this gracious invitation to address you on this important occasion. I am going to focus on the Memory of the World International Register in as far as it relates to the revised general guidelines, which most of you will probably have seen on the Memory of the World website. To do that, I'm going to try to focus on two issues because these, in a sense, speak to something of an update on the situation currently obtaining here in Paris. So I'll focus first of all on the comprehensive review, which led to the approval by the executive board of the statutes of the International Advisory Committee, a group of 14 experts drawn from all the UNESCO regions that is tasked with the responsibility of assessing nominations and making recommendations for inscription. I will then focus very much in relation to the revised general guidelines on what I consider to be untested issues, processes that we'll have to deal with as we go forward. So there is a great deal of learning that has to be done. And I think that with the support of memory institutions all over the world, as they give us feedback on the new process that is described in the general guidelines, we will, I think, be richer for it. And so I invite you to read the general guidelines with a renewed interest in the hope that you will engage with us. So two issues that I want to focus on: the comprehensive review as background to the revised general guidelines, and what I consider to be untested issues, and so on and so forth. So first of all, with respect to the comprehensive review, some of you will know, and I know that Korean memory institutions have been following this process with interest, that the International Advisory Committee of the Memory of the World Program decided to carry out a review of the Memory of the World Program because things had changed radically, including the adoption of the 2015 recommendation concerning the preservation of and access to documentary heritage, including in digital form. So it was the ISC that decided to have this review and submitted its report in 2017 to the executive board then. The executive board decided that it wanted a further comprehensive review of the program, building on the work that the ISC had done. And so the Memory of the World Secretariat was tasked with that responsibility of undertaking this comprehensive review. The Secretariat did what it could to present an action plan for the comprehensive review, indeed carried out the comprehensive review as mandated by member states. But when its consolidated report was considered, it was decided that in fact there was need to continue with the comprehensive review, and so the task was handed over to the member states themselves, and because of this, there was an open-ended working group which was set up to look at two key issues, which I have noted there in the PowerPoint slide, if you can see it. So the legal framework for the Memory of the World program and the Memory of the World International Register itself. So the open-ended working group deliberated on issues relating to these two aspects of the comprehensive review. A lot of progress was made, but it was felt that more work needed to be done, and so the open-ended working group became the limited participant working group to carry on with issues that had not been settled during the open-ended working group. So the open-ended working group was open to all member states that wanted to take part in the deliberations, whereas the limited participant working group was limited to a number of member states drawn from all the electoral groups of the organization, along with the two co-chairs who came from Albania and Palestine. So, in summing up the background leading up to the finalization of the comprehensive review, I would say that there was something of a dynamic tension, and that tension could be seen in the way that the comprehensive review process was approached, in the sense that it began with the International Advisory Committee, moved on to the UNESCO Secretariat, and finally rested with the member states themselves. And quite clearly, you can see there that there were some issues underlying this particular background, not least the fact that there was a recognition that the Memory of the World program had been hitherto driven largely by the expert community. There was also a recognition that the UNESCO Secretariat indeed provided managerial oversight on the Memory of the World program, and of course its execution. And then also there was recognition that there was need for greater intergovernmental involvement in the operations of the program, and therein lies what I refer to as this dynamic tension. And I think that in the end, the revised general guidelines attempted to capture the tripartite nature of the program in a way that addressed the concerns of the various stakeholders. So if you like, it was an attempt to clarify the specific roles and responsibilities to be assigned to the International Advisory Committee, the UNESCO Secretariat, and the member states themselves. And as I said, the two issues that preoccupied the deliberations that took place were the legal framework for the Memory of the World program and the Memory of the World International Register itself. And so during the 211th session of the Executive Board, the general guidelines were approved by the Executive Board, and so were the statutes of the International Advisory Committee. Now I want to focus on the outcomes. So for your purpose, what remains and what's new? I think this is the information that you are particularly interested in. Well, some of the key changes include the following. Now, first of all, nominations can only be submitted by member states through their national commissions. Now, this means that individuals and organizations must go through the national commissions who will submit nominations on their behalf. It may also be the case that national commissions may request the Secretariat, the UNESCO Secretariat, to grant access to such individuals and organizations for the purpose of submitting such nominations. Such authorization, I need to underline, can only come in writing from the National Commission concerned. And so you can see already there that the member states were trying to put the intergovernmental imprint on the operations of the program, to make sure that there is a filter mechanism for the submission of nominations. Here is another point worth noting. Nominations should be submitted using a dedicated online platform, which has since been constructed by the member of the World Secretariat. And an important point to underline here is that that online platform is accessible only to member states through their permanent delegations to UNESCO, their national commissions for UNESCO, and member of the world national committees where these exist. Now, I've already noted that the member of the World Secretariat may grant access to private entities or individuals upon the request of member states through their national commissions for the purpose of submitting a nomination directly or providing comments on existing nominations. Now, I do need to point out that although we have constructed this online platform and built within it the submission functionality, nominations can still be submitted via email to the member of the World Secretariat by filling in the nomination form provided on the Member of the World website for this purpose. The online platform uses the exact template of the nomination form. An emailed nomination form, of course, will be uploaded on the online platform by the member of the World Secretariat. Now, we would prefer nominators to use the online platform for efficiency. It lessens the burden on the member of the World Secretariat, but that does not stop anybody from filing a nomination form using the template that is there by email. Another point to note is that the selection or inscription criteria has remained largely the same as it was conceived of by the expert community. This is a very good thing. It recognizes the fact that the program has largely been driven by the expert community. It also places premium on expertise. And so this has been preserved to a large extent. Now, of course, member states decided to include within the revised general guidelines criteria for admissibility. Is a nomination admissible? This task falls to the register subcommittee, again underscoring the fact that member states wanted to place the expert community at the forefront of the assessment of nominations. This is an important point, which we are very proud, that it has been included in the revised general guidelines. Now, another point to make about the criteria for admissibility is that there isn't that much which has been introduced there. There is one point which was introduced by member states. I'll touch on that when I look at untested issues. But everything else remains what had largely been in the the old general guidelines. Such criteria appeared in different places, but in these revised general guidelines, the criteria have been brought together under one section for coherency, for effectiveness, and so on and so forth. So that is a point that we need to underscore there, that in fact the general selection inscription criteria remain fundamentally the same. What has been included are the criteria for admissibility, and even those are largely reflective of the views of the expert community. So having said that, then another important change that has been introduced is that contested nominations are dealt with through an incidental process involving mediated or facilitated dialogue without a time limit, and with the Secretariat undertaking periodic reporting to the Executive Board on the status of the dialogue. Now, this incidental process, it's important to underline, involves contestations between or among member states on grounds other than those concerning the technical criteria for admissibility and subscription. In other words, inscription rather. In other words, again here, the member states are preserving the sanctity of the expert community. They're handing that task over to them. That the process is such that contestation will continue as it has in the past if it is based on technical criteria. Other criteria refer to criteria that may not be those that the expert community might be better suited to deal with. And it is not by accident that we have chosen the category other, because other is simply that, other. We may not know on what other grounds member states may challenge nominations. We leave it out of the realm of the technical discussions that the expert community engages in. Well, here is another change of note. Recommendations for inscription from the ISC will now be endorsed by the Executive Board in an information document, and not by the Director General, as was the case previously. Again, there you have it, the intergovernmental aspect of the program being affirmed by member states. And what is important there is that such endorsement is sought by way of an information document. An information document does not necessarily require decision making by the Executive Board. It is for the information of the Executive Board, and that in a sense ensures that nominations which have come all the way from the bottom have been filtered out through the national commissions, if you will, have been subjected, if ever, to contestation, and have been deemed uncontested or decontested, whatever the case might be. These are sufficient protections that are built into the system, so that yes, it makes sense for the Executive Board to simply endorse such recommendations for inscription, because they've come through a process of vetting. Another point to make with respect to the changes that have been introduced by the revised general guidelines. Now, while the Director General will continue to appoint members of the International Advisory Committee, That's a role which is reserved for the Secretariat, for the Director General as the Chief Operating Officer of the organization. The Executive Board will take note of such appointments, again, through an information document. This is to make sure that information flows between the Secretariat and the Executive Board in as far as the operations of the program are concerned. So it is clear, from what I've said, that what the revised general guidelines do is to define as clearly as possible what the roles and responsibilities are of the three key stakeholders involved, the expert community, the UNESCO Secretariat, and the UNESCO governing bodies. This is the aim in the end. Now let me move on to the second point that I wanted to touch on with respect to the comprehensive review, which has given us the revised general guidelines and indeed the revised statutes of the International Advisory Committee. I think that there are three issues that we may treat as having been untested. The process as it begins to unfold is going to help us determine the extent to which the system can withstand stress. One important addition in as far as admissibility is concerned has to do with excluding from consideration any documents that espouse opposition to the UN Charter or to the UNESCO Constitution, that deny human rights, that foster hate speech, that promote racist or discriminatory rhetoric. Now, an important point to make there is that the decision made by the Register Subcommittee on admissibility is final. Now, this is an important point to note. It's an important protection to include, because it tells us that whereas there may be different interpretations of the criteria for admissibility, including this particular one added in, it is still subject to the intellectual debate, to the intellectual deliberation on the part of the Register Subcommittee. And the subcommittee's decision is final. For me, that is important. It is a safeguard that was needed. Right, so that's the first point, which we'll have to deal with as we receive new nominations under this new system. How will the Register Subcommittee wrestle with interpreting these criteria? The second issue, as far as I'm concerned, has to do with the untested dispute resolution mechanism, which is captured in section 8.6 of the revised general guidelines, and it is called incidental process. Now, there are some points to take into account there. First of all, you've got the fact that only contestations raised by member states which are concerned by a particular nomination will be taken into account. Nominations may be contested on technical or other grounds. This is a point I made earlier on. The nature of the contestation will determine the process employed for a possible resolution of the issue. And if a nomination is contested on technical ground, then it is possible to involve the Register Subcommittee to attempt a resolution of that contestation, provided the nominator and the contester agree that such advice by the register subcommittee may indeed advance the nomination or may resolve their perceived differences. But if a nomination is contested on other grounds and it involves member states, including one of them writing to the Director General to stop everything else, then Section 8.6.5.2.4 of the revised General Guidelines is triggered. What that means is the Secretariat shall immediately instruct the International Advisory Committee that the Register Subcommittee should cease its evaluation, or if indeed the evaluation has been done, it shall be withheld and it will become dependent on the results of the dialogue. This particular section of the revised General Guidelines triggers the process of dialogue automatically. And that dialogue is without time limits. It is going to involve mediation or facilitation, whatever the concerned parties may choose, and so on and so forth. This has not been tested, and we yet have to see how it will pan out in real life. The last point that I want to raise with respect to untested issues or processes has to do with the intergovernmental character of some of the provisions in the revised General Guidelines. For example, submissions shall be made by member states only, and for practical reasons through their national commissions for UNESCO as submitters. What about individuals and other private entities that would like to submit nominations? Will this be a barrier to them? What mechanisms will national commissions as entities within our member states that are independent of the UNESCO Secretariat, what mechanisms are they going to put in place to ensure that they encourage individuals and other private entities to submit nominations through them? That is a national matter, and I think that it is important for national commissions to ensure that the process is seamless, that the process is inclusive of as many stakeholders as possible, and that they are validated in their work to submit nominations. Of course, we've got the issue of international organizations. There is a specific provision for international organizations, which includes UN agencies. It includes intergovernmental organizations that have a relationship with UNESCO. It includes international non-governmental organizations that are in an official partnership with UNESCO, and we do have a list of such international organizations. Obviously, this is both an exclusive and inclusive provision. Yes, it may exclude those that are not in an official partnership with UNESCO, but it does include many other international organizations, especially non-governmental organizations that are in an official partnership with UNESCO. Nevertheless, these are issues that will have to be tested, particularly when you take into account the fact that international organizations are submitting nominations which touch on other national jurisdictions will have to seek the approval of the national commissions for UNESCO in those jurisdictions. And now that may be administratively difficult, but it is something that we need to test, and it is an issue, I think, that we will address as and when it emerges. So then, in summary, I would like to suggest to you that the process of the comprehensive review was hugely successful, resulting in the approval by the Executive Board of the statutes of the International Advisory Committee and the revised general guidelines of the Memory of the World program. And yes, there are some issues that we will have to deal with as we roll out the system, as we begin to learn from the reactions that we get. And that is why we have kept an open door policy where the Memory of the World Secretariat is at your disposal for any questions relating to the new process. I would like, on that note, to thank once again the National Commission and the Institute for the gracious invitation for me to address you on this occasion. Thank you very much.